All right, so are you ready to dive into this whole mindful morning thing? Because we got a ton of research on this.
Yeah, it seems like everyone's talking about it these days, right?
Yeah, and I gotta admit, some of it sounds a little too good to be true, you know? Like, just changing your morning is gonna make you, like, super productive and stress-free.
Right. It can definitely sound a little hyped up, but the interesting thing is your sources actually dig into the science behind it.
Oh, really? So it's not all just, like, self-help gurus and Instagram influencers?
No, no, they talk about how our brains are wired for routine.
Hmm.
And when we establish good routines, especially in the morning, it kind of sets us up for success in a way.
Okay, so there's some actual science backing this up. That's reassuring. But I have to admit, when I think morning routine, my mind goes straight to those super intense schedules you see online. You know, the ones where people are up at 5 a.m. running marathons and writing novels before breakfast. Is that really what we're talking about here?
I mean, some people thrive on that kind of structure. But one of the key takeaways from your research is that a mindful morning routine isn't about fitting into some rigid mold. It's about figuring out what works for you.
Okay, that's a relief. Because while I'm all for self improvement, I also really enjoy my sleep.
As you should. Sleep is so important. But here's something your sources highlight. A good morning routine can actually lead to better sleep overall.
Now, that's what I call a win win. But where do we even begin?
Well, a lot of people think mindfulness equals meditation, which it can, but it's not the only way.
So, what are some other ways to incorporate mindfulness into our mornings, even if we only have a few minutes to spare?
Your research highlighted a few that I really liked. One that stood out was focused breathing.
Just breathing, that seems almost too simple.
Right. But even taking like 5 minutes while you're having your coffee, just to focus on your breath, it can have a big impact on your stress levels throughout the day.
5 minutes, I can definitely handle that. It's amazing how such a small shift can make a difference.
Absolutely. And since we're talking about small shifts, another building block is incorporating some kind of movement.
Okay, I knew this was coming time to dust off the running shoes, but
Yeah.
seriously, does it have to be a full blown workout to get the benefits?
No, not at all. Even gentle stretching or a quick walk can make a difference. It's about getting your blood flowing and waking up your body.
Right, I definitely feel more alert after a brisk walk. But you know what else seems to hijack my brain first thing in the morning? My phone.
Ah, yes, the scroll trap. Your research talks a lot about that.
Okay, I'm definitely guilty of this. But what's the big deal? Is checking your email before you even get out of bed really that bad?
Well, it can start your day off in a reactive mode instead of a proactive one.
Mm,
You know, you're immediately bombarded with information instead of taking time for yourself.
wow, I never really thought about it like that. It's like I'm letting the outside world dictate my mood before I even have a chance to wake up fully.
Exactly. So giving yourself a bit of a digital detox, at least first thing in the morning, can be really beneficial.
Okay, that makes sense. So less scrolling, more mindful breathing, and maybe a quick walk. I can already feel the stress melting away. But let's get real. How do we actually make these routines stick? Life happens. Kids wake up early, deadlines loom. Sometimes you just want to hit the snooze button and forget about the world. What happens then?
That's where those practical tips and tricks come in. And you've got a goldmine of them in your research.
Let's dive into that then. What are some of the most effective strategies for overcoming those inevitable obstacles?
Well, one thing your sources emphasize is that it's got to be flexible. You
Mhm.
know, life happens. You can't expect to stick to a rigid schedule every single morning.
So it's more about having some go to practices rather than a set in stone routine?
Exactly. One article even suggested having like a plan A and a plan B.
Yeah,
Plan A for those calm mornings when you've got time to spare, and plan B for when you're running behind or the kids are being extra demanding.
I love that because it takes the pressure off trying to be perfect.
Right. And that's where those micro routines can be super helpful. Even on your busiest day, you can usually find a minute or two to just focus on your breath or think of something you're grateful for.
It's about those small moments of mindfulness sprinkled throughout your morning.
Exactly. And it reminded me of this concept called habit stacking that one of your sources mentioned.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. It's the idea of tacking a new habit onto an existing one, right?
Yeah, like instead of scrolling through social media while you're waiting for your coffee to brew, you could try focusing on your breath or doing a quick gratitude meditation.
It's like my brain is already programmed for that coffee break, so I'm just hijacking it for a little mindfulness boost.
Exactly. You're so clever. But, it's interesting because your sources also talk about how our brains can be our own worst enemies when it comes to forming new habits.
Oh, I know what you mean. It's like my brain always seems to prioritize the easy option, even when I know the harder option is better for me in the long run.
Right, like hitting the snooze button versus getting up for that morning walk.
Every single time. But seriously, why is it so hard to break those bad habits, even when we're super motivated?
Well, your research suggests it's because our brains are wired to prioritize immediate gratification over long-term rewards.
So it's not really laziness, it's just our ancient brains trying to keep us safe and comfortable.
In a way, yeah. It's like our brains haven't quite caught up to the modern world.
So, how do we overcome that? How do we convince our brains that those mindful morning habits are actually worth the effort?
Well, one strategy that came up a lot is connecting with your why.
So, basically, reminding myself why I'm doing this in the first place.
Exactly. What is it you're hoping to gain from a more mindful morning? More energy, reduce stress, better focus.
All of the above.
Right. So when you're tempted to hit that snooze button, you can remind yourself, this is about more than just getting a few extra minutes of sleep. It's about creating a morning that sets me up for a more productive and fulfilling day.
It's about making choices that align with my values and goals.
Exactly. And sometimes we need a little help staying on track, which is where the power of accountability comes in.
It's like having a workout buddy, but for my mind.
Right. Your sources talk about how sharing your goals with someone else can make a huge difference, whether it's a friend, a family member, or even just an online community.
It's about knowing you're not alone in those early morning struggles.
Exactly. You can celebrate your victories together and encourage each other when things get tough.
And speaking of sharing the mindful morning love, one thing that really struck me in your research was the idea of bringing these practices into our families.
Yes, extending that mindfulness beyond ourselves.
Exactly, because mornings can be so chaotic, especially with kids. How do we create that sense of peace and presence when everyone's rushing around trying to get out the door?
Your sources had some really good tips on that, like family yoga, or even just having a tech-free breakfast together.
It's about starting the day with intention, not just for ourselves, but for our families as well. And on that note, it's interesting because while we often think of technology as the enemy of mindfulness, constantly distracting us, your sources also talk about how it can be a tool for good.
Yeah, it's all about finding that balance, right? Like there's so many apps now for meditation habit tracking and even connecting with accountability partners.
So we can have our own little digital mindfulness support group.
Exactly. And the technology is only going to get more advanced. Some of your sources even talk about personalized wake-up experiences curated by our smart homes.
Okay, now that sounds straight out of a sci-fi movie. How does that even work?
Well, imagine your smartwatch tracking your sleep patterns and stress levels.
Yeah.
And then it uses that data to adjust the lighting, music, even the aromatherapy in your house to create the perfect wake-up experience.
So basically, my house will know how to get my day started better than I do. That's kind of amazing.
It is pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's all about using those tools to help us create mornings that work for us.
Yeah. Exactly. And I think that's been a recurring theme throughout this whole deep dive. There's no one right way to do a mindful morning routine. It's all about finding what works for you in your life.
Absolutely. And being open to the fact that what works today might need to change tomorrow. One article even suggested the idea of morning themes.
Morning themes. Now that's a new one. Tell me more.
So instead of trying to cram every mindful practice into every single morning, what if you had different themes for different days? Like Monday could be Mindful Movement Monday, where you prioritize exercise, and Wednesday, which is your busiest day, could be Focus and Productivity Day.
Oh, I love that. It's like giving each day its own unique energy.
Exactly. It makes it more fun and less like a chore.
It's like we're creating a choose-your-own-adventure, but for our mornings.
I like the way you think. And who knows, maybe in the future our AI assistants will even suggest themes based on our schedules and how well we've slept the night before.
Okay, no, that's a future I can definitely get on board with. Imagine waking up to a personalized morning theme song and a perfectly brewed cup of coffee, all planned out by your AI.
Sign me up. That sounds amazing.
Right. Well, I think it's safe to say we've covered a lot of ground today, from the science behind mindful mornings to some pretty mind-blowing predictions about the future.
It's been a fascinating deep dive for sure.
It really has, and I hope it's inspired our listeners to take a good look at their own mornings and see how they can bring a little more mindfulness into those precious first few hours.
Because even small changes can make a big difference.
Absolutely. So until next time, happy diving, everyone.